Okay. All right. Well, I'm glad you guys are here tonight. We're in our third week in our series called Mine, and we're talking about, all right, how do we go from a belief system or a faith that maybe has been passed down to us, whether Christianity, atheism, whatever it is. But how do we go from a faith that is somebody else's, but it's been passed down to us to where like we own it? And then specifically, when it comes to a relationship with God, what does that even look like? Today, I'm kind of excited about today. We get to talk about a couple of different things that are near and dear to my heart. And honestly, if talking with a fair amount of you is probably near and dear to your hearts, whether you realize it or not. When I was 4 years old, it was the first time that I got to go down to the City Mission. How many of you guys ever been down to the City Mission before? How many of you guys know what the City Mission is? Okay, most of you guys. All right, so it's just a place where you can go, and it's a homeless shelter. It is an opportunity for people who are experiencing homelessness to be able to get up out. So they give them job training. They share Jesus with them. They really try to encourage them, build them up. So it's just an awesome organization. But one of the things they do is they have meals that they serve basically every meal. So breakfast, lunch, and dinner, they'll do meals. And when I was 4 years old, I was first exposed to being able to just go and serving dinner to some of the clients that were there. And it was absolutely awesome. It kind of changed my life, because from 4 years old all the way up through probably my senior year of high school, every year I went at least 4 to 5 times a year to go and serve. So, that's, I don't know what the math actually is there, but that's a lot of time just being able to go down and see people and see, how life's a little bit different sometimes in the way that I experience it. To see some of the needs, and then a lot of times I get down there and I'd be kind of overwhelmed. Like, I don't really know what I can do or how I can help, but then I found avenues to where it's like I could just bring a plate and smile. And it's kind of transformed my life to where even when I went off into college, I found opportunities to go serve on missions trips and go serve overseas. For some of you guys who are getting ready to go to college, if you ever have an opportunity to go overseas on a missions trip, take it. Do it. As you guys are, younger ones, as we're talking about missions trips and doing things here, take advantage of that opportunity, because serving is really, really awesome. In fact, I want to share this one quote about serving that might help you to understand a little bit more about where we're coming from. There's a direct connection. Here, Cash, can you go ahead and move it for me? Thanks. There's a direct connection between growing our faith and our involvement in serving others. There's a direct connection in growing our faith and then our involvement in serving others. Serving impacts you. Many of you have been involved in service opportunities and you're kind of like, I don't really know if I want to do this. But if you get around other people and you're doing it, even like a terrible job is sometimes kind of fun. And at the very least, it does something to you, because when you care about somebody else, it does something inside of you, whether you're a follower of God or not. We recognize, well, this is kind of cool. This is kind of encouraging, because I'm actually able to do something that helps someone else. And part of the fabric of our culture, and we're losing it a bit, but for those of you guys who've experienced it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And it's especially true when it comes to your faith journey with God. Most of the faith stories that I might hear from some of you guys, from adults, oftentimes, as we talked about last week, they intersect with people, but they also intersect with experiences surrounding serving, where you actually get to go and do some of what you say you believe. And it's really kind of cool seeing that. But if we're honest with ourselves, there's a bit of a tension here when it comes to serving, right? It's kind of a cool thing. You're like, all right, yeah, let's go serve, let's go do our thing. But there's often some hesitation in our own life on it, because I don't know if I really want to, or I don't know if I'm able to. You might have an excuse. I don't feel qualified. You ever felt that? Like, I don't have enough skills, or I don't have enough understanding to be able to help this person. It could be a kid at school. They have this need, but I really don't know I don't really know what I would say. I don't really know what I would do. It could be just a family member or a friend or just somebody that, like even here tonight, as you're, getting together and you're like, hey, this person's off by themselves. Like, I don't really know what I would say or what I would do. And so, in the object of serving, you don't do it because you just don't feel qualified. Maybe you don't have the time. All of us have a tendency to where we can be busy. Or we just have responsibilities, right? For each of you, you at least have homework and stuff to do. Homework sometimes takes a little bit of time, but how much do you find that homework takes a little bit more time than you want it to? Anybody live in that world?
No.
And so it can become difficult with homework at spots because we're just too busy. Maybe like we got all this stuff set up. No, you're gonna kill me for this because this is actually in my notes before you even said anything. But we get all this stuff set up, and maybe sometimes like Sunday's the only day that I can sleep in.
Yeah.
Woo! Not calling you out on that, but that's just something that happens, right? You ever just get up on a Sunday morning and it's like, all right, I'm gonna go to church. I don't really want to. I'm exhausted, and I don't really have the time. And for some of you, your parents are like, I don't care, but you're still going. For some of you, your parents kind of give you the option, and it's a struggle inside because you're like, it's so hard. I don't have the time, right? And that can get filled up with so many things. Maybe we just don't see any way that we can help in the situation. But whatever it is, the question that we have to ask ourselves is should I overcome my hesitations to serve? Now I think if we just stop there, most of you would say, hey, we're in church, so what's supposed to be the answer? Yes. Okay, great. But here's the reality. When you're in that moment, to where you have the opportunity to serve or not, and the hesitation comes, that yes answer that you're supposed to give, does it come that easily? Not all the time. Especially when it's dealing with like serving your siblings, right? Or your parents. Or your classmates. You guys all know what I'm talking about, right? We know the answer probably should be yes, and if we're going to be followers of Jesus, then He's a servant, and so we serve, and so our answer should be yes, but it just doesn't come that easy. But maybe think of it this way. What type of impact would it have on my life if I actually gave up the hesitations and gave up my excuses? What would God want to do in my life? If you got your Bibles, turn to Matthew chapter 14. We're going to look at verses 13 through 29. If you don't have a Bible, go ahead and run back and grab it real quick. But Matthew chapter 14, it's kind of a big chunk. We're not going to read all of it. We'll fill in some of the gaps. But Matthew chapter 14, and as you guys are grabbing your Bibles, as you're opening it up, Jesus here is in a spot where He's been caring for people, He's been serving people, He's been going out of His way to love people, and it's just, He's getting out of gas. He's been just absolutely, He's been healing the sick, He's been healing the blind, like miraculous stuff. But Jesus is starting to reach His limitations, and then we find out something dramatic happens in Jesus' life. Something absolutely, well, if it had happened to you, imagine what your emotions would be. Here, let's look at verse 13 of chapter 14. It says this: when Jesus heard what happened, He withdrew by a boat privately to a solitary place. If you read the verses before, his cousin John had just been beheaded. John, who was one who basically said, hey, this Jesus, this is the promised one that you can trust. This is the one that you can love. This is the one that you can turn to in your life. He's not just a man. He's God in the flesh. Trust Him. That John, his cousin, has just been beheaded because somebody basically had an axe to grind against him. He's just been beheaded. Jesus is just absolutely torn apart. And let me throw up a map here. Jesus is up in the region of the Sea of Galilee. He's actually over by Tiberias. And what he does is he actually takes a boat and goes all the way over. We don't see it in this passage, but in Luke's account, as he's sharing some of this, he says he goes over to the wilderness next to Bethsaida. So he basically heads across this way, and heads over into the wilderness here. Now, I want to show you a picture of what that would actually look like today. So this is the mountains on the one side, and then this is the wilderness over here. So Jesus heads off to this solitary place over on the other side of the Sea of Galilee, and he's just kind of hanging out there with his 12 disciples. And look what happens in verse 13 or verse 14. Or I'm sorry, second half of verse 13. Hearing this, the crowds followed him on foot from the towns. So go back to the other map for a quick second. Basically, the Sea of Galilee is a pretty big sea, but you can kind of see across it. And so everyone sees that Jesus is kind of heading this way on the boat, and he's just been healing people. He's been like healing their sick, and they're just like, wow, this guy's awesome. Like I need to hang around with him. And so they start gathering as they're going through the towns, building a crowd, bigger, to where most of the people from the region are just kind of walking around the lake, to where as Jesus is going across, they're walking around to where he's going to be coming off. So when he gets off that boat, you know that time to where he's just out of gas, he's just totally just wants to be alone because his cousin's just been killed. Jesus gets off the boat, and there's thousands of people that are waiting for him. Verse 15, as evening approached, or verse 14, when Jesus landed and saw the large crowd, he had compassion on them and healed their sick. Even when Jesus was going through tremendous pain himself, he found that, you know what? I care for these people, and so I'm going to seek to serve. Verse 15, as evening approaches, the disciples came to him and said, this is a remote place and it's already late. Send the crowds away so they can go to the villages and buy themselves some food. The disciples are hungry. The crowd is hungry, and they're in the middle of nowhere. Go ahead, back to that other picture. All those people from that region have come out to see Jesus. Do you guys see any, I know it's a little grainy or whatever, do you see any towns or anything even nowadays right there? The closest town is a couple of miles away down that way. And they're all the way over here. This is just deserted wilderness. And the disciples are getting hungry, the crowd's getting hungry, and they make a legitimate statement to Jesus. Hey, it's getting late, we're all starving. You ever been there before? You're just like starving, and then there's no access to food where you're at. Is there a panic that builds up in your soul in that moment? I know there is for me. So as they're going through this, it's time to eat, and the disciples are making a reasonable request. But Jesus does something very interesting here. Look at verse 16. It says, Jesus replies, they do not need to go away. Which, if I was in that moment, I would be like, wait, what? I just told you that there's nothing around here. Why would they not need to go away? And then he says, you give them something to eat. So all these people had just kind of, like they heard about Jesus. They're hearing that he's healing the sick. Do you think they're like, you know what? I'm going to pack my lunch for the day. I'm going to get it all set, and we're going to head out the door, and we're going to make kind of a nice like family picnic. Or do you think they're like, oh my goodness, my daughter is paralyzed. Jesus is on the boat. I have no idea where he's going to land, so I'm taking off and trying to get around the sea as fast as I can to wherever he's going to land so that he can heal my daughter. And so there's this tension in this moment to where everybody has just come out. And they're all there, and there's no food. Verse 17 says, we have here only 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. They answered. And you're going to find in a different story that it's actually a little boy who had just brought his own lunch. 5 little loaves, 2 pieces of fish. And out of the crowd that was there, the massive crowd, which we're going to find out later was 5,000 men. So women and children weren't even counted on that. At least 10,000 people, maybe 15, 20,000 people that are there. And Jesus says, hey, bring me what food you got. You feed them. And they say, we've only got these 5 small cakes and these 2 small fish. You guys see a problem with that? I know for some of you, you've grown up in church, so you kind of know where the story's going to go, but don't go there yet. If I come up to you and I'm like, hey, give me something to eat. Let's feed everybody in here. Already there's probably a problem with that, isn't there? Mm-hmm. How many of you guys brought food for everybody tonight? Oh, nobody. So you're in the same boat as the disciples, except it's a little bit smaller of a crowd. Verse 18, bring them here to me, he said. And he directed the people to sit down on the grass, taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven, he gave thanks and broke the loaves. And then he gave them to the disciples, and the disciples gave them out to the people. He basically says, bring me what you have. So here's do a little illustration. Does anybody have any food?
No.
Logan, you got a little bit of food?
No. Chris?
Anybody else have any food? Nobody?
Oh,
We got
Chris
the bottle.
yes.
Yeah. I don't know. I wouldn't take that away from you. You got a tennis ball? All right, who's got something?
Iced tea.
Iced tea? All right, John, bring it up.
I wouldn't do that if I were
Come on,
you.
John.
So do I. Give me off of my
He's
thing.
gonna make it disappear.
Give us some iced tea, John.
Magic shell.
No.
All right,
Yes.
Yes,
now here's the thing. This is all he's got,
John, you gotta cut your addition.
right? I mean, could this help?
Laura.
Yes,
It
John.
might help a little.
Yes, John.
Is it going to feed all of you guys tonight?
Yes.
No. Here's the thing. Sometimes we look at our life, don't we? And we feel a nudge from God saying, hey, you know, sir, go and do this thing. Go and care for this person. And we look at it and we're like, I only have this little bit. I don't even understand how they can even accomplish what you want to accomplish. Do you realize the problems this person has? Do you realize the need that's there? Do you realize all the struggle? I only have this. And what you see Jesus say to the disciples in this moment is, just bring it. Just bring it. Just bring it. And then what happens in that moment is Jesus does something miraculous with their willingness. He cracks out some food that they had no idea where it was coming from. And he started passing it out with the guys who were willing to just say, all right, I'll bring you with what I got. So can I ask this? Who's willing to help pass these out there?
Logan.
Oh, volunteers. All right, Isaac, come on up. Les Jane, come on up.
Taking my Chromebook.
Jesus for water and wine. Iced tea.
Yeah, John.
Rice Krispie treats.
Yeah, John.
We're gonna take a second.
I would do that if I were you with the tea, mister.
Yeah, you
Go
forgot
ahead,
to
pass
give
them
John
out.
Buddy's tea.
Don't pass
Rice
out.
Krispie treats for everybody.
Oh my God.
You can have more than one. All right.
Whoa.
Like we can rock a couple of treats here. Don't be stingy. All right. Let's rock out a couple of treats.
I'm not bringing these home to my annoying.
I only brought it.
Thank you, sisters. Glory.
All right. So as they're getting passed out, here's I wanna put another quote up on the screen. I want you guys to kind of pay attention to it. All right. So as they're passing out, everybody's eyes look well. Yeah,
So Mitch, you love Chris. I'll say it.
all right. So here's the thing, guys. Let me get your attention up here. Here's what the disciples found out.
I saw that flying.
All right, hold up 1 second. We're passing it out. Let's do this here for a second. All they have to do is bring what they have to the table and trust Him with the rest. All that they had to do was bring what they had to the table and to trust Jesus with the rest. And I think if we're honest with ourselves, we could do the same thing. You guys have more potential than you realize, but a lot of times when we look at our lives, we're like, this is all I have. I'm only good at this. But you might be good at more than what you think. Or you might actually not be, but all Jesus needs is what you have. We can do the same thing. we can bring what we have. If we're feeling that nudge to where it's like, all right, I see this need. I don't know really what I could do, but God, I'm just going to take a step. Here, off of that. It's not as daunting and intimidating as it feels. If we're honest with ourselves, they used what they had. My neighbor, as I've been sharing with you a little bit, my one neighbor passed away, and then I was talking with his wife, and I'm trying to just like see how I can care for her, but I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, what she needs and what I have to give, I got no clue. So I just listened for a little bit as she was talking and stuff, and then I said, can I pray for you? Because I guess being a pastor is one of the things I can do pretty easily. So I just said, well, this is what I could do. I just prayed for her. When we were done, she's like, you have no idea how much that needs me. And I walked away kind of going like, that was all I had to give, and yet God used it. It's funny because Evan was scheduled to be on tonight to do music. He called me yesterday and he's like, hey, I have strep throat, it's contagious. I can't come to you. I don't know if I'm supposed to put that out on the internet, but hey, sorry, Evan. Alright, so he's like, but I think Anna could do it. And I was like, well, ask her. And so Anna steps up, she kind of comes in. Were you a little nervous tonight?
More than a little.
Alright, more than a little, right? It seemed daunting and intimidating. But here's the thing, just sitting through practice, I said to Noah as I was sitting through practice, I got lost a little in the music because I'm just sitting there going like, wow. All Anna has to give is, I can sing a little, I can play guitar a little. I can't really lead. And yet, she sang a little, played the guitar a little, and guess what God did? It's not as daunting and intimidating as it feels. And so it's a huge faith builder. It builds our faith. I'm going to ask Noah to come up here to share a little bit. Everybody give Noah a hand as he comes up.
Try to ensure you listen
I
to
won't go your art.
Right,
Noah.
so Noah was an intern with us last summer. He's been just kind of part of youth group. But his senior year, he's gotten involved with his school and serving at his school. And I'm going to ask him a couple questions about it so that you guys can maybe hear a little bit of maybe some things that you guys could even do. But kind of hear his story in it because, well, serving wasn't like this big, massive thing on your radar.
No, not at all. No.
So let me ask you, what are some of the ways that God's given you to actually serve just where you're at in your school?
Yeah, definitely. So there's a Christian club at our high school called Static. It stands for Students Taking Action to Introduce Christ. And about a year ago, I had the opportunity to be a part of the club, and not only be a part of the club, but lead some people to come into the club. And so basically our goal is to just show the gospel to people. And I know that may sound intimidating, like how do I tell other people about Jesus? How do I verbally do that? But God's been opening doors to where we have prayer group in the morning, and all that really consists of is just praying for each other, and having kids who may not know anything about Jesus just kind of walk in, and all we do is ask, hey, what can I pray for you today? And it might be a small thing like, hey, I got a test, or hey, I'm dealing with this thing with a friend. And it's little things like that where we've been able to step in and serve the people and care for them.
So let me ask this: when you started,
Yeah.
Was it like, all right, we got a prayer group going, and like you're even doing some other stuff to where you're putting like posters and stuff out?
Yeah,
or, like, so was that all like right there at the beginning, and you're like just leading right away, and it was like, yeah, I'm just coming in, and we got this whole thing ready to go? Is that how it started?
No, not at all. It definitely took time. It's something that, kind of like we were talking about today. It's the little things, right? And so, it all started with just a couple of people who said, hey, we have a love for Jesus, and right now in this moment we're just gonna pray together. And that's what it started as. We're just gonna pray together. And God took that little thing, and over time He's built it to you know, we started praying in a hallway and turned it into, now we're praying, you know, in this woodshop room, and we have teachers coming in who need hope, and we have students coming in who are craving hope. And so it started with something really, really small, and we did not think at all that it would turn into something where God would bring in so many people. We thought it was just something cool that we could be together and talk with each other about things we're dealing with. But yeah, it started with just that small little action.
So in essence, you just brought what you had
We brought what we had.
in the moment. All right. How's your faith kind of grown through it?
Well, it definitely taught me how to be a better leader. Definitely that people want more in this life than what they have, and so God's been able to open my eyes to the fact that so many people in school are hurting, and He's been able to use my voice and to use some of our other students' voices to just care for one another, and so my faith has grown like exponentially in confidence because of the little things. And so like even last week I had the opportunity to sit down and talk with some kids about like the story of Jesus. They've never actually heard who Jesus was or who He is and what He means for our lives. And in that little conversation, God showed to me that if I just brought what I had, which was just a conversation about what God's done for me, that He could turn it into something crazy and something for Him. And so God's been building my faith in helping other people in our group to see that.
Does it ever feel daunting or intimidating when you do that?
Definitely. There's been I've talked to you about it. There's been a lot of times where, you know, I even question like why am I doing this? You know, like kind of what's the purpose of like putting my voice forward? And those are real questions that I have, you know, daily. And going back to, we have prayer group in the morning, and that helps so much. Like just being able to say, God, I don't really even know what you're doing here. Like I don't even know what today holds, and you know sometimes it's a little scary for me to even talk to people about Jesus or go out of my way when I'm busy to care for someone. But in those moments where it feels daunting, people have been even there to serve me too, and to give what they have. They may just have, you know, how can I pray for you today? And that's helped me big time.
When you look at schools, friends, those type of things, what are some of the opportunities that you see to where maybe, you know, as you're sitting out there tonight just thinking about, all right, well, what could I do? What are some of those things that you're just seeing kind of like just around, you know, in your school, with your friends, even with family?
Yeah.
What's some of those things?
Yeah, so some of the coolest things that I've seen are actually some of the smallest things that you would think you have to do. You know, if you're really looking for opportunity to serve, you know, especially at a public school, you guys have the opportunity all around you. Like I was saying, people are hurting, and so, you know, maybe it's just like I said, just reaching out to someone and at school and saying, you know, how are you doing today, and asking them how they're doing, and listening to some of the things they're going through. It doesn't have to be this whole thing where you have to feel like you have to start a revolution. You know, that's not our job. And so, you know, maybe it is your close friend who you can reach out to and talk to about real life issues, or maybe it's someone you're seeing, you know, on the side who you've seen for a while and doesn't really look like anyone's really caring for them, and you just talk to them for a little bit. And off of that, as you continue to build in relationships with others, you start to see your faith grow.
I appreciate you sharing tonight and sharing some of your own story. Give them a hand, everybody. You know, when it comes to serving, you guys, you don't have to start a club. You don't have to, like, it's just about, hey, God kind of puts it on your heart, or there's a nudge to where, like, all right, I see a need. Okay, I'll just take a step. That's really all it is. And this is what you're going to find. There's a place your faith will only go once you decide to step out of your comfort zone. There's a place your faith will only go once you decide to step out of your comfort zone. God's going to use that in such a way that you're then going to be in a place where you're like, I never thought I would be here, but it's so cool that I am. You know, the disciples were in that moment to where Jesus feeds 5,000, 15,000 people in this moment, and they see this. And I want to finish the rest of the story because sometimes we read these two stories separate, and then we'll send you off to your groups. But verse 22 or verse 21, it says, "Those numbering those who ate were about 5,000 men, besides the women and children." In verse 22, immediately Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of them out to the other side. And while he dismissed the crowd, so he said, "Hey guys, I'll take care of the crowd. You just get on the boat and go to the other side." Said after he dismissed them, he went up on the mountainside to pray by himself because he recognized, I'm serving, but I still have to spend some alone time with my Father. And later that night, as he was there alone, and the boat was already a considerable distance from land and buffeted by the waves because the wind was against it. I need to show you a picture. This is what the Sea of Galilee looks like. Where it's actually located, winter storms will just kind of come up, and there'll be 6, 8, 10, 12-foot waves out in the middle of the sea, out of nowhere. And so the disciples are out, and this is like a rickety fishing boat. We're not talking like they're in like a 40-foot like yacht or something. Like they're just in a real rickety fishing boat just trying to paddle, and they're battling against waves like this. Verse 25, shortly before dawn, Jesus went out to them, walking on the lake. And when the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. "It's a ghost," they said, and they cried out in fear. But Jesus immediately said to them, "Take courage, it is I, don't be afraid." Peter says, "Lord, if it's you, tell me to come out into the water." And Jesus said, "Come." And then Peter got down out of the boat and walked on the water towards Jesus. I can't help but to think that Peter in this moment sees this happening. Oh my goodness, it's a ghost. No, it's me, Jesus. Have courage. And his mind immediately goes back to, oh my goodness, this was the one just a couple hours ago that just brought 5 loaves, 2 fishes. I just brought them to him. And he did an amazing thing with it. And then Jesus says, "Hey, come out and step out of the water." Do you think Peter was ready to step out on the water that morning? Probably not. I don't know for sure, but probably not. And yet, he came with his loaves, he came with his fish, and said, "All right, Jesus, do with it what you must." And all of a sudden, his faith starts to grow to where Jesus is like, "No, I want you to step out on the water." And yeah, Peter struggled with faith, and he's going to struggle with his faith and growing in it, but God is using this, and Jesus is using this to where he can start to see, I can trust this guy. I can trust him. Here's the thing I want to leave you with. There's a direct connection between growing and serving. You want to grow in your walk with God, you want to make it your own, serve. And serve with what you got. Don't have the mentality, go big or go home. Just serve with what you got. So here's my question for you. Where is God nudging you? Where's God nudging you? On the back table, you're going to find just a sheet of some things to where we have some needs even here. That if you could help us with a Rock Life on Sunday mornings, and maybe you're like, yeah, like I'm not good at a lot of stuff, but like one of the things, you know what we really need around here that we don't have? We need some help cleaning up afterwards. Like 10 minutes just to kind of pick up some stuff around.
Like the Christmas tree?
Well, yeah, okay. The Christmas tree needs to get picked up at some point too. But it's just a little thing like that. But do you know how much of a difference that makes for the rest of the staff as they come in? Do you know how much of a difference it makes for when a parent brings their child back here on Sunday mornings and it's actually clean and they say, I think I can trust these people with my kid because they actually take care of their space. You're just like, I just picked up 2 rattlers. Like that's all I did. But you actually made an impact and a difference on someone's life. And so on the back table, if you're interested, you want to sign your name up, if you want to commit to something, if you want to talk about something, there's some opportunities there. I encourage you to grab a card, take a look at it, circle some stuff, put your name on it, and leave it back on that table. And I'll get it tonight. But don't lose the moment. Don't lose the moment to where some of you talking with you guys, hearing some of your stories, God's used you in ways to where you don't even realize. You're just like, I saw that need and I just kind of took care of it. And it made a huge difference, and you probably don't even realize the difference it's made, but it made a difference in your life. So where is God nudging you? Because there's a direct connection between growing and serving. Ladies, you guys can go off to your group. Guys, I want you to stay here. We're going to split you guys up again, but we're going to spend some time in group just kind of talking about this, all right?
I got you, Noah.
Um,
1 second.
Jeez.